Hey, everybody, and welcome to our first of two episodes looking at Johanna Spyri's Heidi. We're sorry this one's late, but some stuff came up. Bottom line, everyone's good, and we're going to get right back on schedule. To that end, there's not much that I have to say about our next episode that I couldn't say about this one. In 2 weeks, we'll be back with part 2 of our look at Heidi. In today's episode, we'll be taking you through big and small screen adaptations of Heidi from 1937 to 1978. In part 2, we'll pick up in the early 80s and make our way to today. We're excited for you to hear both parts, and we think they'll be worth the wait. Part 2 will be out in 2 weeks on Tuesday, April 12th. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections about today's episode or any others that you'd like to hear on the show, remember to email adapterparishcast@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, we'd love it if you would share that with the world by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/adaptcast. We've got a patron-only community and our bi-weekly bonus show, Adapter Parish Plus, with episodes releasing every Tuesday between episodes of this show. We hope you check it out. Show notes from this and all other episodes can be found at adapterparishcast.com. And with that, on with the show, Adapter Parish, episode 113, Heidi, part 1. Hello and welcome to Adapter Parish, a podcast about adaptation. I'm Jeremy Latour.
I'm Ari Lipshot. Today we'll be talking about Heidi, and we may have forgotten how to do this. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute, yeah.
You may have noticed the schedule changed slightly, missed an episode. We won't go into the gory details. Suffice it to say, we had some stuff going on. We don't like to miss episodes. We're all healthy as of this moment, and no one had COVID. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because it really, we want these episodes to be timeless. So we're not going to spend, a long time talking about what's going on in our personal lives. Everybody's fine as of right now.
I feel like we've been succeeding in having all of our episodes be timeless.
Yeah.
Because they're quite long.
Timeless.
They go on.
Yeah, that's time full.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
No, the opposite.
The opposite.
Yeah,
one.
the other thing.
The other one.
Heidi.
Heidi.
Heidi. Okay.
So anyway.
Why did you make me do this?
Well, the funny thing is, we thought this was going to be like a short children's book type episode, and as Jeremy delved further into the research of what we needed to watch, which is a task that I used to do and was sort of gradually taken away from me because I think it was felt by some that I was not being sufficiently exhaustive in what I required us to watch for an episode.
Can I just be clear about something?
Yes.
This is not only the first time you're bringing this up on the show. This is the first time you're bringing this up to me.
In life.
Is it? I mean, do you have something you want to say?
No, I'm just saying I used to do this.
Yeah.
I used to do the research. That was like my thing. In my mind, you kind of took it on at one point because I was like, it's too much for me. Then I never really took it back. But I have noticed that since you've taken it on, we have had to watch more things for each episode.
So what you're doing right now is you are definitely painting a picture that we've talked about a lot, which is that we are more exhaustive now than we used to be.
Yes.
This is the first time that I've heard you explain it through the lens of, I took a thing away from you because I didn't think you were doing a good job.
Let me put it this way. We did have a conversation regarding this episode. It doesn't matter what the version was that you felt we should and could watch. The argument that you were putting forth, it was something, spoiler alert, we ended up not watching.
There are several we didn't watch.
The argument you put forth, you were listing out the number of days that we had available to us and the number of things we had to watch. And you felt that the number of things we had to watch was much lower than the number of days available to us. And I sort of started listing out additional commitments in that we're committed to,
which
in
I
that
felt was
span
unfair.
of time, and basically ended up saying, so we have 14 days. We are doing podcast things 12 of those 14 days, and you think we should do more. And you kind of said, well, when you put it that way, fine.
I believe the way I said it was, when you put it that way, I understand and agree.
Yes. What I think we've sort of hit upon.
Are we processing some shit like in the show?
I think we might be.
Is this a conversation you thought we could have this off air? You know what? No.
It's just
I'd
happening
like
now.
to do it when the microphones are running.
I
because I want to make sure that the argument is recorded.
I wanted to explain why Heidi is a two-parter. Because on first blush, you might think, why would a short children's book from the 19th century that is not like super popular these days require 3 to 4 hours of content? Why? It would take you 3 to 4 hours to read the book. So I guess what I'm saying is I think the place that I feel really comfortable is doing English language versions that are reasonably available and versions in a language that is appropriate to the text, right? So when we did Les Mis, we watched a bunch of French ones.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. Heidi, we watched a couple German ones. I think that makes total sense. And then I guess occasionally ones that strike our interest, like Japanese anime, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, that's become, I mean, we kind of have to do that now.
That's become a tradition.
Yeah.
The one you wanted to do, I think, was like a Hindi version, and I
Yes.
just felt like I had to draw the line because I was like, yes, but there's like, if you do the Hindi version, then you're going to do the Romanian version, and then you're going to do the, I don't know, like, there's so many different versions.
I just really wanted to do that one.
I know. Well,
and it is like 3 hours long.
Yeah.
I still am going to watch it at some point.
I'm sure that you are.
It's on YouTube. I'm
That's
going to
great.
link to it. It's called Dofool.
Okay.
I want to see it.
Okay. That's fine. And again, none of these rules are hard and fast. It just seems like a
So
good
none-
guideline to follow.
None of these rules are rules.
None of these rules are rules. They're more guidelines than actual rules.
Bottom line, going into this, I thought, like you probably did, that we were going to talk about the book. We were going to talk about the Shirley Temple version.
Yeah.
And we were going to talk about that one from like the early 90s, the one that was on the Disney Channel.
Yeah.
I figured that was it. And then it turns out,
No.
Heidi's hugely popular and has been remade many, many, many times.
Many times.
So we're talking about, over the course of 2 episodes, I guess technically 13 versions. 2 of them are really one version, and then we're talking about them in this episode. But I'll say this, that Disney one from the early 90s, we're not going to get to it this week.
Here's the year that we're leaving off on. 1978. So we're doing basically the versions from before we were born, and then the versions... Nope, there's a 1982. So in episode 2. So I was not born in... Neither of us were born in 1982. All right.
We have a lot to get through.
Suffice it to say, I think we should plunge ahead.
Okay, let me go ahead and give a quick back of the book, and then maybe you can go through it. But
As best I can.
before you do that, I do have a question.
Yes.
Let me do this back of the book, and then I have a question.
Okay.
As I say.
Okay.
Little orphan Heidi goes to live high in the Alps with her gruff grandfather and brings happiness to all who know her on the mountain. When Heidi goes to Frankfurt to work in a wealthy household, she dreams of returning to the mountains and meadows, her friend Peter, and her beloved grandfather. That was the Goodreads description.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That's it. That does it. Okay, so here's my question for you. I'm going to be intentionally unfair
Okay.
about Heidi.
Okay.
This is a weird book where not a lot really happens, and Heidi's she's not really that interesting, and she's just kind of a sweet kid, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Why do you like this book? Again, I'm being intentionally dismissive because I ended up enjoying it quite a bit too, but it's not a book where a lot happens.
I really enjoy 19th century children's literature with a moral.
Yep.
As you well know. I really enjoy...
I think this is always worth repeating.
I really enjoy some of the tropes that we see over and over and over again in this era. I love the plucky orphan child, right? So I think we're going to do the plucky orphan trilogy. No, it's going to be a
Quadrilogy?
A quadrilogy.
If I know anything from the Alien films, it's quadrilogy.
Because it's Anne of Green Gables, Heidi, Pollyanna, Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm, right? Although Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm was not technically an orphan, but it's a very similar story.
Is the little princess in there?
A little princess.
What about the Secret Garden?
Secret Garden. Secret Garden is not plucky orphan. Secret Garden is like anti-plucky orphan.
Is it?
Yeah, because she's a shithead. That's the whole point.
But she's an orphan.
She's the one that her heart has to be lightened. I'm really talking about the plucky orphan, the one that comes to town and cheers and brightens everyone's lives. I also am interested in the sort of religious 19th century children's literature, which does enter into this quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
I myself personally really like the Elsie Dinsmore books, and if you know what those are, you know why I'm laughing, because they're awful. But I have read all of them. There's about conservatively 800 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end, they just turn into like weird travel logs of like Elsie's journeys through America because I think the author ran out of ideas. Do you remember when we did The Bad Seed?
Yeah.
She got a book at Sunday school,
Mhm.
and it was like she was reading it, and she's like, "Oh, mother, I'm just gonna go sit under the tree and read my book." That was Elsie Dinsmore. She had been given Elsie Dinsmore, and that was sort of the joke because Elsie Dinsmore is like a religious book about like a girl who is so good that she's like willing to be punished for her religion, and then she like converts everyone around her to the good news.
I can see how that is a good thing to use in The Bad Seed.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I've gone off on a path. I don't think we're ever going to cover Elsie Dinsmore because I don't believe it's been adapted. Probably not. It's also very racist. I just want to be super clear. If anyone's thinking I'm talking about this like
It's not problematic.
Not thoughtfully. It is super racist and like super like Gone with the Wind, Old South. Why can't it be like this way again? It's very bad. Anyway, I enjoy this type of trope. I also enjoy the trope. Again, Heidi kind of brings all these things together. I love the trope of like the ill child who becomes magically well through the force
Yeah.
of personality. I, in fact, for this episode, purchased and reread a book that is now out of print called Take Up Thy Bed and Walk, which is like a literary study of that exact trope from children's literature, like of this period, which is like the invalid who becomes well magically. And just like this sort of very interesting look at this depiction of disability and like the very unrealistic depiction of you can get over your disability if you only kind of try hard enough, especially if you're a child and you need to like learn better ways. So she covers Heidi in this book, which for reasons that we'll get into in the course of the plot. So anyway, it just features a lot of tropes that I really enjoy. I wouldn't say like I love the story, like, oh God, I just love that Heidi. Like that's how I feel about Anne of Green Gables.
Yeah.
Don't feel that way about Heidi. I just think it covers a lot of ground that I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a long answer to your question.
No, that's fair. And before you go through the plot, it is worth saying it was published in 1881, written by Johanna Spyri. It was a Swiss book. It was originally published in 2 parts, Heidi, Her Years of Wandering and Learning, and Heidi, How She Used What She Learned.
Yeah.
Finding that out made the book make a lot more sense to me because it is one of those ones that's kind of weird where halfway through, suddenly she goes home. You're going to get into it.
Yeah.
And it's not the way I would structure it if I were writing it as one book.
Yeah.
But it was not one book.
Yes.
Would you like to talk about what happens in Heidi?
Yes.
This was all new to me. I'd never read it before.
So our story begins with a little 5-year-old girl being dragged up a mountain in the Swiss Alps by her aunt, variously pronounced this woman's first name. It's Dete. We're going to call her Didi. It's pronounced many different ways in all the versions that we watched. And it turns out that this poor little girl's parents died years ago. She's been being cared for by her aunt and her aunt's mother, so I guess her grandmother, and the grandmother died, and this aunt wants to take a job, and she can't take the job with this like little 5-year-old in tow, so she's taking her back up the mountain to her grandfather, who, as everyone knows, is sort of this recluse. He doesn't live in the town. He doesn't come down amongst people. This is sort of like a very rural town, and he is extremely rural even for the town. Like, the town is miles from anywhere, but he lives like a 2-hour walk up the mountain just on the slope with his goats. And he is her father's father. So she basically drags this poor kid up the mountain. She meets a couple people along the way. She meets a convenient friend to give Heidi's backstory to as she goes on her path. She meets the goat herd, Peter. She meets his blind grandmother. She meets his mother. They're very poor. They live on the mountain, blah, blah, blah. So they get all the way up to the top of the hill and the mountain. And Dee Dee's like, hey, I brought you this kid. She's your granddaughter. You got to take care of her. Bye. And like basically tumbles back down the mountain. And he's like, nope. But he's got this little kid left on his hands. And it turns out, like, they really get along. Like, she's really happy up there. She loves the goats. She loves sleeping in her little bed in the hayloft, like looking out at the stars. He really likes her kind of immediately and is happy to have her there. And they eat lots of bread and cheese in ways that sound really delicious. And
I mean, it's the coziest fucking book I've ever read in my life.
It's a lot of hygge in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And she's out there like playing with the goat. It's so beautiful where they live. Like, it's just like so picturesque, which I think is probably why this has been adapted so many times, or one of the reasons, because it is gorgeous. Like, if you want to make a beautiful movie, all you have to do is like take a camera up into the Swiss Alps and be
Or-
like, here.
Or don't.
Or
like,
don't.
Just pretend that you're in the Alps.
Yeah.
Because either way, it's going to be pretty.
Yeah.
If you can actually go, it's amazing.
It's amazing. It's beautiful up there. They just have the greatest time.
Like, can I just dig in on the coziness for a second?
Sure.
I swear to God, my entire life reading books, there are two things. My list of coziness is two things long. It's Ishmael describing sleeping in the bed at the beginning of Moby Dick.
With Queequeg?
With Queequeg. It's the whole thing where he talks about how in order to appreciate how warm you are in a blanket, a part of you has to be exposed to the cold.
You have mentioned this to me
Which
many
is
times.
something that, like, there's no single line in a book that I've ever read that speaks to me more than that. And so that's, like, the coziest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I got no problem with Queequeg being in the bed because that's great and cuddly. This is the second coziest thing that I've ever heard. I want the Almuncle to take care of me so badly up at the top of a mountain.
Toast you some cheese.
During the snow. I want him to make me a bed, and I want he will be gruff with me. He'll be very, very gruff, but he will be kind in his heart, and that's what I want. And it just sounds so cozy.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I like being tucked in.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes I say, can you tuck me in? Because it just gives you a feeling.
Sometimes last night.
It just gives you a feeling of like childhood and
Mhm.
warmth and like someone caring for you. And that's I just want him to tuck me in, tuck me into the hay and put the blanket around me, and it's very nice.
Even if he's shitty about it the next day.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'll deal with it. It's fine.
So they're very happy up there. This goes on in the book for a couple years. Like she goes up when she's about 5 and she's like 8 when the next thing
Yeah.
happens. There's sort of rumblings in the town, like, why don't you send her to school? Why don't you ever go to church? Like, people aren't happy with his behavior. She's never going to learn anything. She's hanging out with this illiterate goat herd Peter who keeps telling her that it's impossible to learn to read, and she believes it. And
He didn't say it's impossible. He just says it's not worth it.
yeah. Then one day, Dee Dee reappears back on the mountain. She says, I have this great opportunity for this kid. I met this family and they have this daughter. Invalid is the word that is used in the book, or at least in the translation that we read. Obviously, that is not a modern good word to use.
Mhm.
But they have this daughter. She's very sickly. She can't walk. She uses a wheelchair, and she really needs a companion. She's very lonely. Like, she can't go to school and this and that. And her father, they're very, very rich, but her father travels a lot. He's often away. And they were thinking that having an unspoiled, fresh little Swiss girl would be the perfect companion for this, this city child who's burdened with, shall we say, ennui. And the grandfather is like, no, you cannot you're not going to take this kid. And by hook or by crook, she kind of tricks Heidi into coming down saying like, oh no, you can come back like later tonight. And Heidi's like, okay. So Frankfurt is miles away, hours and hours on the train to get there. It's not close. But anyway, they go back down the mountain. She basically kidnaps her, takes her to this family in Frankfurt, and Heidi is basically there against her will, living with this family, getting up to all sorts of hijinks because she just doesn't understand what she's supposed to do.
And who's in the house?
There's Clara,
Mhm.
the young lady.
Claire Sessamon?
Claire Sessamon, who's a few years older. That's part of the source of the conflict, which is she was supposed to be a same age companion, and she's much younger. She's like 4 years younger. There's the housekeeper, Fräulein Rottenmeier, which is a great name.
Mhm.
There is Sebastian, the servant. There's Clara's father, Herr Sessamon, and then there's this doctor that they're sort of good friends with.
And Frau Sessamon.
Frau Sessamon Jr. is not alive.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about his mom.
Frau Sessamon Sr. is she's never called Frau Sessamon, she's called Grandmama in the book.
That's fair. I guess many times in all of my note taking, she's referred to as Frau Sessamon.
So anyway, Grandmama is another character.
Yeah.
Heidi actually, despite not really wanting to be there and wanting to be back home every single day, and despite getting up to hijinks that make Fräulein Rottenmeier not care for her, like trying to save rolls for grandmother up on the mountain because she can't chew black bread with her old teeth, and they get all moldy.
Oh
It's
my
a whole
God.
thing.
When Peter's grandma says that she's blind and Heidi's like, you can see, we just need to go out where it's light out. Then you'll be able to see.
It's very sad.
Breaks my goddamn heart.
It's very sad. So despite all this, Heidi's actually doing pretty well, especially once Grandmama arrives. Like, Grandmama teaches her to read. Like, the tutor's been coming to the house, and she hasn't been making any progress because she thinks she can't.
She also teaches her about the Lord.
She teaches her about the Lord. She gives her, like, Bible stories and things to read and psalms and what have you.
Teaches her to pray.
Teaches her to pray.
That's like any version we watched of this where when Heidi meets the grandfather, she's like, and so you're going to help me pray at night? We're like, what is this?
But
Heidi doesn't know how to
She
pray.
doesn't know how to pray.
She needs the grandmama to teach her how to
She
pray.
hasn't even met her yet. And she enjoys being with Clara. They're good friends, but she just really misses the mountaintop and her home, and she's sort of being told like she can never go back. And I don't think I saw this, as far as I know, in any version that we watched so far, this exact little beat. She's unhappy a lot, and she would cry. And Fräulein Rottenmeier literally says to her, "You're not allowed to cry. It is wrong to show your emotion in that way."
Yeah.
And so she just like is like, "Oh, I gotta swallow it down." Like she's trying to be obedient. And so she falls ill. It turns out she's sleepwalking. They think there's a ghost in the house, and the doctor comes.
Sorry,
and
a what?
They
Oh, a ghost?
a ghost.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
They think
sorry.
the house is haunted, and it turns out that she's just sleepwalking. And the doctor comes. The doctor, who's this very nice man, comes to see her, and she's telling him, "I'm very unhappy, and I just really miss my grandfather and all this." And he says, "Well, what do you do when you feel that way? Do you have a good cry and get it all out?" And she's like, "No, I'm not allowed to cry." And he's like, "Oh no!" Like,
get this girl back to the goddamn mountain.
he goes to Herr Sessamon, and he's like, "You're gonna kill this child. Like, you got to send her back to the mountains. She's a delicate flower, and she is wilting in this hot house that you have placed her, and she needs to sniff the fresh mountain air." And Herr Sessamon's like, "In my house?" He really is very upset about this.
The fact that all of his servants thought that there was a ghost when really it was just Heidi sleepwalking.
Well, you loved that part because he was like, "I live in a house of fools and idiots. It's a tiny girl, and you're all dumb, and I should fire you."
Goddamn fucking idiots.
Yeah. He literally, I think, says that. Not goddamn fucking idiots, but he does say, like, fools and idiots.
Which translation did you read?
I don't know. Not that one, apparently.
My note was goddamn fucking idiots.
All right. So anyway, I'm going to try to get through this fast as I can.
Well, that's the thing. You are not even halfway through because this is all Heidi, her years of wandering and learning. We haven't even gotten to Heidi, how she used what she learned.
Well, this part is a little bit faster. Sends her back up the mountain. She's happy to be there.
Now we're in part 2.
And so now Heidi's back on the mountain. She's learned to read. So now she gets to spread her sort of joy to the people on the mountain. So she can go to Grandmama and like read her books. And Peter's got like a penny allowance from like a penny a week or something from Herr Sessamon, so like he's in fine
Doesn't
form.
that happen after he breaks the wheelchair?
After he breaks the wheelchair, that's right. Okay. So anyway, they all come up and visit her because now she's back in her element, right on the mountain. And it turns out that the mountain is very healing, so they're gonna leave Clara up there to become one with the mountain.
Well, no, they leave her up there just to hang out with
just
Heidi.
to hang out.
They don't know that she's going to be able to walk.
But they do think it's healing. The
That's
doctor
true.
has said like
That's
the
true.
mountain air will be good for her condition, whatever that may be.
Over the course of the whole second book, like the doctor comes up and visits for a while, and we have
comes,
chapters and chapters of the doctor visiting.
Grandmama comes for a while.
Doctor falls in love with the grandfather.
We'll get to that in a minute. He does do that, yes. Long story short, here's what happens. Clara's up there for like a month, right, visiting, and they're so happy, and every day they go up to the high mountain, and grandfather carries her. She goes in her wheelchair and whatever, and they're just so happy up there. But Peter is really jealous because he's had Heidi's like 100% attention for all this time, and he's super jealous of this girl that's like taking up all of Heidi's time. So he sees the wheelchair as like the symbol of her, being able to get around, and he's like, if I ruin this wheelchair, she's not going to be able to be up here anymore, and she'll have to go home. So he, one day, in sort of a fit of rage, he pushes the wheelchair down the mountain, and there's this very like long description about how it rolls like literally all the way down to the town, past the town, and smashes into pieces, like this very like long journey that the wheelchair takes. And they don't even know what's happened to it. They don't even see it because it's gone so far away. Like in every movie version that we've seen so far that has this,
like
the wheelchair's just like right there. Like, oh my gosh, it's smashed. I really wish I'd seen it roll like all the way down the mountain. But anyway, no one really knows.
Some say it's still rolling to this day.
No one really knows that Peter's done this, and he feels really guilty about it. But it turns out that it was all for the best, because without her wheelchair, Clara's just going to have to learn to walk. So she magically learns to walk. We're not really told what her condition is that allows for this.
She's an invalid, you said.
Grandmama comes back, and Daddy comes back. And
to be correct, when you say grandmama, you're talking about Clara's grandmother.
Clara's grandmama, yeah, because
Peter's grandmother is grandmother.
Grandmother, and she can't see anything. She's blind. She doesn't get healed. You'd think they would let the blind grandmother be healed.
Well, no, she's like sad in her heart, but then her heart is healed.
Right.
Not her eyes, but
her
heart.
So everyone comes and finds that Clara's magically can suddenly walk again, and everyone's very happy. And the grandfather's heart is also healed because he's like, you know what? Here's something I've been wrong about. Kind of living so far up here, away from my fellow man. I'm going to go down and live in the town during the winter so that Heidi actually can go to school. Because there's no way she can walk up and down the mountain in school time when the snow's on the ground. So we're going to live down in town in the winter, up on the mountain in the summer. And the doctor's like, you know, I'd like to I'd like to be part of that. And so like this also really isn't in any version that we saw so far. The doctor and the grandfather just sort of move in together and form this communal living situation. That's kind of how the book ends. Clara obviously goes back to the city. Grandmama goes back to the city. Clara can now walk. And Heidi and the grandfather and the doctor are just kind of happy together, and they're going to live their lives.
Can I pick up one thing that I think you left out?
Yes.
That I think is important because it's kind of treated differently in every single version that we watched. Who was the grandfather before he lived up a goddamn mountain?
Just a guy.
Like he was like
Just
a
a
businessman.
A man of the town.
But like he was a person.
Like kept a shop or something.
Yeah. And then he decided to go up the mountain.
Yes, he had a tragedy in his life and went up the mountain.
And he said, fuck people.
Yes.
I'm going up the mountain.
That is what happened.
And I feel like it's important to say that because some of the versions treat him like he's just a mountain man.
Right.
Like he's just always lived up at up to the top of the mountain.
Yes.
But like I will say in this episode, I don't think we're going to talk about a single one that actually gets into his backstory according to what's in the book.
No,
not a single one.
I don't think so. A lot of these do the thing where there's a thing in the book that why would you change it? Just like his name.
Yeah.
His name is different in every single one. He might not have a name in the book now that I think about it, which is maybe why it's different.
I think that's probably why.
But there's all kinds of stuff like that it's like, or the name of the town they might change it or things like that. This is the thing that I can never quite understand is why you change details like that when it would have made no difference to leave them the same.
Well, like,
and in however many years of doing this podcast is something I will never understand.
Yeah.
I have yet to understand why.
I mean, in this episode, like the example I think is the fact that in the book, the guy who works in the house, his name is Sebastian.
Yeah.
And he's hilarious. And we love Sebastian. Sebastian was my favorite character coming out of the book.
Yeah.
And in almost every version, he's called Sebastian, except for the Shirley Temple one where he's Andrews.
Yeah. Or, here's another. Heidi's father's name was Tobias. And we saw a version that they decided to name the grandfather Tobias and name the son John. Why? I don't know.
Who can say?
Who can say? Like, it's just very strange. But we know Heidi's mother's name is Adelheid because she was named Adelheid after her mother, which is where Heidi comes from, which is very funny because we think of Heidi as being a name, just a name in and of itself, when in this book, it's like a weird nickname for Adelheid.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to kind of get into these adaptations? I think we should.
I think we should.
Yeah.
So the book's published 1881. We go forward almost 60 years to 1937, and we got our first big movie.
Yeah.
Of course, it's Shirley Temple as Heidi.
God, she's so cute.
Yeah, she's really cute. I
Like,
get it.
It's not the kind of thing that you look at and go, yeah, I know this was popular, but I don't get it. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
She's great.
Mm-hmm.
I love Shirley Temple.
Yeah.
She's so cute.
Directed by Alan Dwan, written by Julian Josephson and Walter Ferris, produced by Daryl Zanuck. Is Shirley Temple as Heidi, Gene Hirschholt as Adolf Kramer, the grandfather.
Yeah.
This blew my mind that Gene Hirschholt is a person and an actor, because I only know Gene Hirschholt from the award at the Academy Awards.
And what is it? It's like
It's
a
the humanitarian.
award?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Was he a humanitarian?
No, hated people. Hated people, famously. No, yeah, he was famously a big humanitarian.
That's great.
And that's why they named the award after him.
I mean, I assumed.
But like, if you were seeing it in the day, you would say, I know Shirley Temple, I know Gene Hirschholt, and I know Arthur Treacher as Andrews, who played the butler in A Little Princess.
And when we watched the trailer, second build after Shirley Temple, Arthur Treacher. No, I'm sorry. Shirley Temple,
Gene Hirschholt,
then Arthur Treacher before anybody else. It's the same cast. It's the same. Miss Minchin is Miss Rottenmeier.
Yep.
And Clara is the same little girl who played Lavinia.
Yeah.
So it's the very same era as Little Princess.
Conservatively 3 feet taller than Shirley Temple.
She's much taller.
And there's a scene where she has to
lean on her.
Lean on her in order to walk.
She's a lot taller.
It is comical. Here's my challenge with something like this. My challenge is, this is one that people love. There are 2 that we're going to be talking about. One is in this episode and one is in the next one that I am like deathly afraid to say anything negative about because I think they're the most beloved. One is this one, the Shirley Temple one, and the other one is the Disney one, the Jason Robards one from 1983, which we're going to talk about.
We already watched it.
Yeah.
We'll get into it.
Oh, man. Okay. Yeah, like to be clear, as you say, Shirley Temple, great.
Could not be cuter.
I don't have a problem with Shirley Temple in this movie at all. Gene Herschel as grandfather, he's great. Rottenmeier's great. Well, the acting, okay. So
the plot's a little batshit, I think is what you're saying.
This plot is insane. This plot is absolutely insane. I'll just start right off the bat. It does the thing that I hate. It starts with the book. It starts with the book, Heidi, and you open it up and the pages are turning and it's not the book, and I hate it so much. It's so stupid. Also, where does the little Dutch girl stuff come from? She's like
no
reading
idea.
a book.
There's sort of a dream.
Clara?
There's sort of a dream sequence with a song
Because it's a Shirley Temple movie.
It's a Shirley Temple movie, which happened in A Little Princess too, that there was
Mhm.
sort of an extended dream sequence where she gets to like sort of be a different character and sing a song. But this was even more removed because in that one, like the other characters in the movie were sort of in it.
Yeah, it was you were there and you were there and
yeah,
you were there.
yeah.
And it had something to do with the plot.
Like Miss Minchin was like the witch and
Yeah.
things. This was just, I was concerned they didn't know the difference between the Netherlands and Switzerland because
Yeah.
it was a whole thing about the little Dutch boy and the little wooden shoes. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, let's make the assumption that they did not know the difference.
Yeah.
No, they used Shirley Temple, so we need to have her singing and dancing.
Yeah.
And my greatest disappointment was that I didn't like the singing and the dancing in A Little Princess being part of the story.
Yeah.
But I did like her dancing with Arthur Treacher.
Yeah.
Because they're a delight together.
She didn't dance with him in
How
this.
much dancing does he do in this
He
movie?
doesn't dance at all, and I was very
No
disappointed.
dancing.
No, it was very disappointing.
Ridiculous.
I thought he would be. Because he sings a little bit with her, I think.
A little?
But they never do a dance. Because the dance that they do together in A Little Princess, not to compare the two,
Mhm.
but the dance they do together in A Little Princess could not be more adorable. It's so cute.
Shouldn't have been in the movie, but it's really
Yeah.
cute.
This version also had, of everything we watched so far, the most evil Miss Rottenmeier that she wants to murder
Yeah.
Heidi. Like, she wants her to die.
She's not willing to do it herself, but she is willing to sell her, and I'm using terminology that is used in the movie.
Very problematic terminology, which we won't bring up more than this one time.
She wants to sell her to fucking gypsies.
That
Tries to kidnap her and sell her to gypsies at
Yeah.
the end of the story. This becomes the thing I feel like, I'll admit, is a little overused to talk about motivation when you're talking about actors performing a character. But it is interesting to me that if you were the one playing Rottenmeier in this and you said to the director, what is my motivation here in this scene? I would have to say to you, well, it really is the most important thing to you right now that you kidnap Heidi from the house because she did get you fired and you just desperately, desperately want to sell her to gypsies.
Yeah.
That's what you want more than anything.
there's this whole scene at the end in the police station with who's the police captain? It's someone we know, right?
Oh, it's Sig Ruman.
Yeah.
Who I fucking love so much.
The grandfather is there, that they've arrested him like basically as a crazy person, and she's screaming, no, that's my grandfather, please let me go to my grandfather. And Miss Rottenmeier is there saying, no, this is my daughter, Herr Sessamann's house. No, I don't know what you're talking about. This is my daughter, please let her come home with me. And Heidi is trying to tell them the truth, and they're not listening to her, which actually is very similar to the end of Little Princess now that I think about it.
Yeah, bet.
But it's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful to watch. By the way, the grandfather has walked from his home on the mountain to Frankfurt, and let me tell you, I looked up where those two places are on the map. They are not, as I said before, not close together. It is a 4-hour drive now today.
Yeah.
So they're far, but anyway, all is well. Of course, in the end,
Well, all is well after a chase scene through the streets of
There's a
Frankfurt,
chase.
and then suddenly the woods.
Yeah,
But then they get caught anyway.
I just didn't like the part where she was like screaming and crying and no one was listening to her. Again, like I think this is literally designed to tug the heartstrings
Yeah.
of people watching poor Shirley Temple being very put upon, but it was pretty awful.
I guess there's just watching it, I really felt it really made me reflect on what my experience was of reading the book. Because
Yeah.
I said before, like, not a lot happens in the book. The book has a very, very chill tone. There is drama in it. The drama is what's going on inside the characters.
Mhm.
Like the grandfather, he is the greatest arc because he hates people, and then he realizes, no, I need people and I need to be part of a community. That is a really big dramatic thing, and it happens. This is the kind of movie where they looked at it and they went, well, not enough really happens at the end. We need a chase scene.
And a police station.
It just doesn't need to be there. It's not doing anything because what you have instead of character motivated drama and scenes and dialogue, you just have 10 minutes of chase scenes where the characters aren't saying anything, they're not doing anything, they're just going fast.
Yeah.
And that's not compelling. Like, I find it absolutely not compelling.
Yeah. On the other hand, as I said before, it does tug at my heartstrings to see little Shirley Temple be very sad because I think that Calvin looks like Shirley Temple.
Yeah, he does. He has Shirley Temple mouth.
Yeah.
They do that little pout thing.
Brr, brr, brr.
Can I ask you a question about my last note here?
Yeah.
And we probably should have talked about this beforehand.
Yeah. Once again.
This does have the thing where Heidi is taking the bread, right? She's keeping all the
Yeah,
bread.
it does have that.
But isn't the grandmother not actually in the movie?
That's correct.
Yep.
I think she's not.
My note is Heidi never even met the grandmother. Why would she want to bring her bread?
Yeah, it's unclear.
Totally. Do you want to move on?
Let's move on.
I feel bad dunking on this one.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's so enjoyable. I love a Shirley Temple movie. I truly do.
If what you're measuring movies by is how much Shirley Temple they have in them, this is clearly the best version of Heidi that we have watched and could ever watch. By that measure.
It has the most Shirley Temple.
It does. It does by far the most Shirley Temple.
All right.
But as an adaptation of Heidi,
it's not great.
It left me feeling a little empty.
Yeah. Much like A Little Princess, which it's sort of like its sister movie, you know?
15 years go by, and now we decided to really pivot here, and we watched a Swiss-German film, Heidi, 1952, directed by Luigi Comencini, written by Robert Schweitzer, William Michael Trecklinger, and Max Weinberg. I'm assuming of the E Street Band.
Okay.
And like so many that we watched, here's the deal. You want to watch this one? Go to YouTube because it's on YouTube. Whole thing's on YouTube.
It's subtitled.
Well, there's two. You can either watch the English dub or you can watch. What I did is I downloaded the Swiss-German version.
Yeah. And then got the
subtitles. And then got the English subtitles and put it together because we wanted to watch it in the original language. But if you want to watch the English dub, you can do that as well.
Yeah.
This was the complete opposite of the Shirley Temple version.
It was super chill.
Every way.
It was lovely.
Super, super chill. But it's still making really big decisions. Like, here's a decision that it made. The movie starts, she's already living with the grandfather.
Yeah.
We don't see any of the stuff with her aunt. We don't see any of the stuff of her coming up the mountain. She already knows the grandfather. She already knows Peter. She already knows Peter's mom. Peter's grandmother is not there. She's not a character in this.
Yeah.
She's so sweet with the grandfather, and he's so nice immediately. Because that's every version starts in a different place.
Yeah.
And this one decided to start. No, she's already been up there for a long time.
Yeah, and this one got into something that I always find super fascinating in movies that are not English, which is that there is plot around the language that they're speaking.
Yeah.
So up on the mountain, of course, they're speaking Swiss German. But then she goes to Frankfurt, which is in Germany, and there's a whole plot about how she is not allowed to speak Swiss German. She must speak High German. To my ears, they sound the same.
Yeah.
Clearly, they're not the same. But I just kept wondering, are they thinking she knows how to speak High German? Because no one's teaching her how to speak that. That was the source of my confusion. But yeah, Miss Rottenmeier is very how dare you speak that terrible tongue? Of course you must speak in the proper way, like we speak here, High German as opposed to Swiss German, which I think some later versions that we watched, I think even versions that we're not talking about in this episode, kind of try to do with accents, different accents of English. But it was interesting to see it done in German. I remember there was one thing that they said that I was like, aha, that must be the Swiss German pronunciation, because I knew whatever word it was in German and it sounded different. That's a very interesting story, I'm sure. But I find this stuff very fascinating in languages that I don't speak and know nothing about.
It was nice actually seeing it in a movie.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to see it in an English language version.
Yeah.
I didn't even mention any of the people. Elspeth Sigmund plays Heidi. She didn't really go on to do anything else. She's
adorable.
She's adorable and fantastic. She's not Shirley Temple. She's not one of these people that's oh, this is a child performer for the ages. She's just a really, really natural performer.
Yeah, she just looks like a kid, a normal kid.
Which is that's the great thing about Heidi, is Heidi isn't this, I'm going to call her a Pollyanna, even though that's complicated, because Pollyanna isn't really a Pollyanna.
We got to do Pollyanna.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it before you said it.
Yeah.
But Heidi's not this pure little soul. She's a kid.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that people love about her. She's just a kid.
And one thing that I have noticed too, and this may be just an incredibly broad generalization, in movies from this era that aren't American, I noticed that people look like people.
Yeah.
We did a Les Mis. Remember we did a French Les Mis that I was I just love how everyone looks like a person.
Yeah.
No one looks like a movie star. It seems that way in this one as well.
You mentioned Rottenmeier. Can I say a thing about Rottenmeier that we loved in this version?
Yeah.
Rottenmeier, in the first half of the book, she's probably the closest thing to an antagonist that the book has.
Yeah.
Like, in the book, she's intense. Like, she's definitely the villain.
Yeah.
In the movies, though, we kind of saw her portrayed a lot of different...
There's a range.
Yeah.
There's a range.
So the range is bigger than you would think. But
Yeah.
if we're really restricting it just to the antagonist side of the range... You know, in the Shirley Temple one, literally tries to sell her to travelers.
Yeah.
And that she thinks will kill her. As evil as could possibly be. And there are other ones where she is also, like, evil. This one, though, was kind of beautiful because Rottenmeier was very much Rottenmeier from the book.
Yeah.
It really, really does not take to Heidi at the beginning, is constantly on her about, you know, doing all the things you mentioned, speaking a certain way, being a certain way. But
she goes on a journey.
She goes on a bit of a journey because Clara at the house is like, I have been inspired by this little kid. I think I can walk. Heidi, help me walk. And she learns how to walk and she teaches herself how to walk again. And there's a scene where Rottenmeier comes in the room and like freaks out about it in a moment. Then we cut to time has passed and she's been practicing walking and Herr Sessemann comes home, like her dad comes home. Like Rottenmeier's great after that. Rottenmeier really likes Heidi after that.
Yeah.
She's not feeling threatened by her. She's like, this little kid helped Clara walk and I actually care about Clara. And I like Heidi now.
Yeah. And when
she's
she leaves,
totally fine.
Yeah, when she leaves to go back up the mountain, she's really sad to see her go. She's like, "Oh, my darling, I love you so much."
Yeah.
It's nice.
It's really sweet.
Because we see the journey.
Yeah.
Like, it's earned.
Mhm.
It's an earned journey. It's not just like suddenly she's had a change of heart.
Yeah, but this was an actress named Anita May as
Yeah.
Rottenmeier, who was just really, really fantastic. Another thing about this one, you mentioned it before. Here's the deal. This movie takes place most in the Swiss Alps. It's very pretty up there.
Mm-hmm.
The Shirley Temple one doesn't really ever take place up there, but they have some beautiful matte paintings.
Yeah.
It's really, like, it is a beautiful movie, despite the fact that it is never actually shot in the Swiss Alps. This one, though, beginning to end, shot in the actual goddamn Swiss Alps.
Absolutely gorgeous.
And it's beautiful.
Makes you want to visit this. I was looking up places to stay on Airbnb like the whole time we were watching chalets.
Yeah, it's like, watch The Sound of Music and watch 1952's Heidi.
Yeah.
And it's, again, on YouTube.
It makes you, the mountains are calling and I must go.
Oh, man. And, like, I'm talking about it is a crappy, like, compressed, pixelated version that's, like, a dupe of a dub.
Yeah.
And on YouTube, but still looks absolutely stunning.
Remember
This
I
movie's
showed you
gorgeous.
Remember I showed you that chalet on Airbnb and I was like,
Yes.
this is where we should go.
I want to go so badly.
We'll go. We'll do it one of these days.
Will the uncle take care of me?
No,
Will he tuck me in?
No, he died.
Will he build a fire?
He died in 1881.
He died a long time ago.
So long ago.
Oh.
Before we move on, do you have anything else? Any last words?
Yeah, one last thing. They do a thing that I really like in this one, because all the versions have to handle the fact that Heidi wants to go home, but she can't go home, because if she can go home, there's no drama. So one of the ways that a lot of versions handle it is, obviously they want Rottenmeier to be one of the biggest impediments she has to going home, but some of the versions also make Clara and Herr Sessemann impediments to her going home.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, sometimes in a really messed up way.
Yeah.
Like, Claire's kind of bratty and is like, I don't care what you want, Heidi. You're staying with me because you belong to me now. This one does it in a really, really beautiful way where it really is, it's just a combination of everyone's bad choices coming together to make her really sad. So, like, she helps Clara learn how to walk. And when Herr Sessemann comes back, he's like, well, Heidi, of course you're staying here. But he's not saying it because he wants to hurt her. And he's not saying it because he's not responding to her saying she wants to go home by gaslighting her.
Yeah.
He just genuinely is not thinking about her feelings.
Right.
He's assuming she wants to stay.
Yeah, he thinks she needs a home.
Right.
Like, you have a home here, child.
Yeah.
Like, this poor orphan.
And she's been taught not to voice her feelings about wanting to go home.
Right.
So he
It's all
just
a
assumes
mess.
she should stay. And it's a beautiful mess. It's exactly the way the mess should be done.
Yes.
And I really appreciated that in this one. But anyway, it's really good and people should see it if you haven't.
So this next one that we're going to talk about has a very interesting story. Picture it. 1968. You're watching, what is it? Monday Night Football? Sunday Night Football?
I have no idea.
You're watching a football game that has not ended. and the score is close. What happens?
I'm going to read this. I genuinely want to read this whole thing. So, November 17th, 1968, the film's premiere on NBC unexpectedly became one of the most notorious moments in American broadcasting because it interrupted the conclusion of a game between the American Football League's two top teams, the Oakland Raiders and the New York Jets. NBC's network management had taken the decision to show the entire game until its completion, even though it was contractually obligated to begin the broadcast of Heidi on the East Coast at 7 p.m. The film's premiere would be delayed by the overrunning game. Unfortunately, the network management's decision was not conveyed to the NBC's control facility in New York. Consequently, Heidi began at 7 p.m. as scheduled, ending the East Coast broadcast of the Raiders-Jets game. Shortly afterward, Oakland scored 2 touchdowns within the final minute, winning the game 43-32 in a major upset. Despite decades passing, many East Coast sports fans have never forgiven NBC for the so-called Heidi Bowl.
Also, like, it's 1968. You have no other way of getting this information.
None.
Like, you cannot go to your phone or your computer or the internet or call anyone, like, to find out.
You could call someone.
I guess you could call someone. Who would you call?
You call someone. Call a friend in California.
You have no other way of finding out. You would have to have waited for the paper the next morning.
No, they put the score along the bottom of the screen.
Oh, well, thank God for that.
Imagine you're intently watching the game and then it's interrupted by Heidi, and then 15 minutes into it, a little thing pops up at the bottom saying Raiders to Jets 43-32. What the fuck happened?
I can't imagine.
Now, you'd think, well, of course, the fact that it was actually a pretty great movie would make up for that.
It was not very good.
I mean, I like to imagine, I don't want to be gendered about this whole thing, but let me just go on a thought. Let me just go down a little quick sidebar.
Go down a primrose path.
That I will admit is very gendered. So I'm just imagining all of these dudes over at a friend's house watching the game.
With their little beers, Schlitz, or what did they drink in 1968?
I don't know.
Pabst
And
PBR.
The host's wife is there, bringing in food and snacks, and maybe a couple of the other wives are there as well. But of course, they're not in the room.
They're in the kitchen.
They're in the kitchen, and suddenly
the whole
thing
probably
gets
pregnant and barefoot.
Yep, the whole thing gets interrupted by Heidi, and I just like to imagine there was at least one household where the wives all came in and all went, "Oh, Heidi."
Heidi.
I love Heidi. Yes, it is terrible that this is happening. It is terrible you can't watch your football game because of Heidi. Yes, I know. Oh, I know. It's awful.
We're
going
to watch Heidi, though.
We are watching Heidi, though, and this is what's happening right now. And I just hope it made someone's day.
Yeah.
Didn't make our day.
No.
It's directed by Delbert Mann, written by Earl Hamner Jr., starred Jennifer Edwards as Heidi, Michael Redgrave as grandfather. Michael Redgrave of the Redgraves?
Of them.
Father to Vanessa? My God.
It's weird that he's Vanessa's father because I think of Vanessa as being someone elderly.
Yeah, but in 1968.
She was a beautiful young woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maximilian Schell as Herr Sessemann. Would you like to say the thing about Maximilian Schell? What sets him apart from all the other Herr Sessemans that we saw?
He's extremely beautiful.
He's a very handsome man.
He's a hot daddy.
This is one of those ones, like, let me just throw it out there. This had some of our favorite stuff in it, but it is also one of the worst adaptations of Heidi that we saw.
Well, because it's not, like, boring. It just has all these moments of just utter batshittery that you're just like, what in the actual fuck? Like, at the beginning, so Heidi, her aunt, I don't think, as I recall, doesn't, like, take her up the mountain. She just kind of drops her off in the town, and she gets walked up the mountain by the priest of the town.
I think so.
He's having a whole conversation with her, and they get up to the house, and she's kind of nervous to go. And Heidi in this one, by the way, is nothing.
Yeah. Not the actor's fault. Not the actor's fault.
She's a child.
The character, like, this is the thing. It's like you can either be Shirley Temple or you can be a really, really interesting normal kid.
Yeah.
And she's nothing.
And she's also, like, very old for Heidi. She's like 11 or 12.
Mm-hmm. Which makes her perfect for Clara.
Yeah, so she's like, he like walks up the mountain and then sort of just goes, "Well, I'm gonna leave you here by yourself now," and just turns, like, literally says to her, "I'm gonna leave you now," and turns around and she's like, okay. like doesn't introduce her or walk her inside.
Let's talk about the grandfather for a second.
Yeah.
He's a very spiritual grandfather in a
Yeah.
way that we haven't had. Like, he goes to meditate on the mountain.
That's his thing.
He goes to commune with the great eagle.
Yeah.
Like, there's literally, he talks about his relationship with the eagle.
Yeah, anytime you say anything to him, basically his response is, well, let me tell you another thing I've learned
Yeah.
from the eagle.
He's just very, but he also hates people.
Just hates everyone.
He's not spiritual in the way where someone is like, let me share this with you. He's very much like, I know how the world works. I've communed with the eagle.
You idiots.
You idiot. You can fuck right off.
Yeah.
I have no time for you.
The other thing about this version is I felt that it introduced something that we were to see again, which is the Miss Rottenmeier is in love with the father situation.
It shocked me that we saw it at all.
Yeah.
And then it shocked me even more that we saw it again.
Like it was consummated.
Okay, more than a very, very handsome Herr Sesseman
Yeah.
and more than a meditative eagle communion grandfather, what threw us in this more than anything?
An absolutely beautiful, wonderful, sweet Miss Rottenmeier.
She was amazing.
First of all, it's Gene Simmons.
Yep, Jean.
Not Gene Simmons with a G of Kiss. Gene Simmons with a J from Guys and Dolls.
And more famously, The Valley of the Dolls, 1981.
Yes. So anyway, friend of the show. We always call people friend of the show if they've been in more than one episode.
She's so beautiful,
She's beautiful
in this movie.
So beautiful. Just like so like real like even the terrible like 1968, how it was
1968 trying to do 1881.
Yeah, like it could not
With
deny her
$10.
beauty. She really she just has one of those because she was in Star Trek: The Next Generation too. Like she had a very long career and was just one of those kind of like a Helen Mirren, like just one of those women that just becomes more beautiful with time.
Yeah.
Do I have a crush on Gene Simmons?
We
long dead Gene Simmons.
If you do, we both do.
So she's wonderful. We just kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, surely she's putting this on. This is a facade because, as we all know, Miss Rottenmeier's terrible. No, she's wonderful. But Clara is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Clara is a brat and awful and mean and just constantly having these enormous temper tantrums. And Gene Simmons is just like, maybe I'm not the right nanny for you because I feel like you're not happy. It's just... It's a very interesting thing.
My note about this was, okay, everyone, here's my pitch. Everyone's nice. Oh, that's nice. It is a shame in the book when only Claire is nice to it. No.
Not Clara.
Claire is a bitch.
Well, it's funny because we hadn't seen some of the more recent ones. And so you were like, well, this is batshit. Nothing could be weirder
Nothing
than this.
could top this.
Nothing could top this. And you kept talking about, which I agree with you, you were like, it is just this weird thing is that you take the same characters and the same kind of basic plot and you're like, well, there's Heidi, but nothing about what Heidi is about is the same.
I mean, can I break it down to a different metaphor?
Yes, please.
Okay. So you tell me you love pizza and I say, okay, great. I'll go make dinner. This is going to be totally fine. What's pizza? Okay. Flour, water, salt, tomato sauce, cheese. Okay, great. And then I present you with a beautiful plate of lasagna.
And I'm like, but I wanted a pizza.
Yeah, but this is the same thing. This is the same as pizza.
The ingredients are exactly the same.
The ingredients are all exactly the same. This is what you wanted. Like, no. And I appreciate, yes, I'll agree. It tastes good. I'm enjoying eating this lasagna, but I tell you,
it's not pizza.
I really wanted pizza. And that's what this is. It had one of our favorite lines from any of them when Heidi meets the grandmother at the beginning. The grandmother is talking to her about her parents. And she says, oh, your mother, she was so great, so sweet, so thoughtful, so different from Dita. How's that one? And I'm not putting any stank on it at all. That's the line reading. It's gold. It's so good.
It's so good.
But then the rest of it is just insane.
And like Heidi brings a goat to the house in Frankfurt. So we were just trying to figure out the logistics of a goat living in the wardrobe and how much goat poop there would be in the wardrobe.
Goats smell.
They're so stinky.
The reason farms smell is because they're full of goats.
Full of goats.
And the thing about Clara is that she's fighting with Rottenmeier And she's kicking her legs a
A
lot.
lot.
And I remember writing down, like, she's kicking her legs a lot for her little girl who can't walk. But then it turns out that that's a plot point
Yeah.
because it is completely in her head. The doctor says, oh, no, she is physically able to walk.
And
She's
the doctor,
just blocked.
and the doctor even says, you'll notice when she has those tantrums, she kicks her legs a lot.
Mm-hmm.
This is entirely like, it's not even like, oh, it's psychosomatic. It's like everyone understands, like, she's faking it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird.
I think it's of note. You know who did the music for this? John Williams in 1968.
Yeah, why not?
And he needed to calm down. This score is a little too intense for the story that we are being given. It is in your face aggressively saying, "This is beautiful what you are watching." And like, John, take it down a little bit. I know you're John Williams, but you got to take it down a little bit.
And then there's this last scene at the end. It's this whole. It's been very chill the whole time. What with Rottenmeier and the father kind of falling in love, and the grandfather meditating and learning from the eagle.
If there's something else I've learned from the eagle.
Then we get to this last scene where Clara figures out that she can walk, and it's just like full minutes of this girl just screaming in pain and dragging herself like from rock to rock on these mountains. It is awful to watch. And then she can walk, and then everyone's like, oh, this is great. It is really interesting that in none of these is it considered, like, even if you physically could walk and were faking it, your muscles would be so atrophied.
Yeah.
Like, you would need so much physical therapy. And in every single one of these, it's just like she goes from not being able to walk to walking and running perfectly within hours.
I would say not in all of them. In a lot of them, I feel like she was still like not doing great.
It's very strange. I would recommend this book that I read, Take Up Thy Bed and Walk, that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, because the author really gets into like this sort of miracle cures and like how this trope kind of came about. The thing that I was disappointed in upon this reading, because it was a book I had read before in the past, and I was like, you know what, let me try to get this, and it was completely out of print. Like, the library didn't have it, like nobody had it, and I ended up buying it from like Amazon UK because they had an out of print copy. And the thing that I was disappointed in was so you know how like you might be reading something and it comes to something that you know a lot about and they get a lot of facts wrong, and then you go, well, now I can't believe anything because I know this is wrong. So what else is wrong?
Yeah.
I showed this to you.
Yeah.
There's a chapter on Pollyanna, which is very interesting because Pollyanna does follow this trope of like this injured person with the miracle cure. And it's all about like, it's all young women and their ability to walk or not walk. And it is this sort of fascinating similarity between all these different books. But she goes on at length about sort of a material plot point in Pollyanna, and she just gets it wrong. Like, I showed you the book, and I went and got the book Pollyanna, and I was like, it literally is the thing that she is saying. It had nothing to do with the point that she was trying to make. She just kind of went on a snarky run about something that she was incorrect about, like textually incorrect about. And it just put me off for the rest of the book. So I was like, well, what else is she misreading? I was not happy about it. Anyway, it does not matter. Did you have anything else on 1968's Heidi?
Yeah, they're all related.
What do you mean?
Remember, this is the one where she's related to
she's
them.
Like, oh, this is your cousin, but it doesn't really come up again. It just...
Well, no, it comes up because Sessman actually, in the middle of the movie, goes up the Alm to talk to the grandfather to bargain with him about getting Heidi to stay. And the whole thing is not just because he wants her to do it because he thinks she's good for Clara, but because she's also his family.
Yeah,
and
his
he's like,
cousin or something.
Which one of us is better for her? And we're family, and we are family. Which they never are in any other version.
It's very weird.
Pizza and lasagna.
All right. There were 3 different Heidis in 1974. 1974, big year for Heidi. 2 were the same.
Technically 2.
Yeah.
Because the first one we watched actually came out later.
There you go.
All I know is it came out in the late 70s.
Okay.
So in 1974, there was an anime series. It was directed by Isao Takahata. This is noteworthy because he also wrote and directed Akage no An in 1979, which we liked. He co-founded Studio Ghibli with Hayao Miyazaki. He directed Grave of the Fireflies, Only Yesterday, Pompoko, and My Neighbors the Yamadas. This is someone who's fucking royalty. Hayao Miyazaki worked on this show. It was written by Isao Matsuki. This was just like every other anime show we've watched. It was 52 episodes. one episode for every week of the year.
Real chill.
Real super chill. The character designs are all perfect and book accurate.
Literally perfect.
Like literally perfect. It is really good. It was also condensed down to 90 minutes and dubbed in English and released in that form at some point in the late 70s.
And that's the one we watched.
We watched that one first. Well, it's not. I feel like we've done both because when we did Anne of Green Gables and A Little Princess, we tried to watch a lot of the show. When we did Les Mis, we did the same thing.
Yeah.
When we did Treasure Island, we were like, we're not going to watch the show. We're just going to watch the English dub movie. And that was terrible because it was awful.
We can't watch 52 episodes.
But we decided to actually sample both
Yeah.
for this one. So we watched the movie first. Then we went back and watched like the first few episodes and then skimmed through the rest of it.
Selection.
Just to get a sense of it. So we are not speaking from the position of having seen all of it. Let us be clear. Which do you want to talk about first, the show or the movie?
I mean, I don't know that you can really separate them. It sort of does the usual thing that the parts of the plot that are the plot of the book are super beautiful and beautifully designed. As you pointed out, the character design is lovely, and then it goes off on little tangents.
Yeah,
with little sort of sub characters and subplots.
Well, like she's definitely there's a dog named Joseph.
Yeah.
In the original, he's Joseph. In the dub, he's Bernard because he's a Saint Bernard. And she has adventures with Bernard, and then she finds a bird, and the bird becomes one of her friends. And the goat, Yuki, which means snow.
Well, that was the thing I was going to say. It was like, in the English dub, it says, "This is my goat. Her name is Yuki." But the goat's name in any translation should be like Snowflake.
Yeah.
So it should have been, "This is my goat, Snowflake," in English. But they kept the name Yuki, which doesn't mean anything in English. Does that make sense? They should have translated the name of the goat, what I'm saying.
The thing that's nice about this is we can dunk on the dub without dunking on the original.
Exactly.
Because the original was beautiful, and
lovely.
I bet if we watched the entire thing, it would be really, really nice.
I mean, all of these are very nice. We just can't watch 52 episodes.
Yeah.
That's all that
but
it is.
The dub is terrible.
Yeah.
And it's also terrible, too. Like, if you're asking me, should the anime invent things in order to fill 52 episodes? Like, yeah, the book is not going to fill all that. So they invent things where she meets this bird and this dog, and she's
a bird.
She's in peril up in the mountains. Like, it can invent all those things. The question to me isn't should the anime not do that.
That was convoluted.
Thank you. It's more about what should the dub include, because the dub, considering it's only 90 minutes, makes some really batshit decisions about how it wants to spend its time.
Yeah.
Spends a lot of time on the dog.
Yeah.
Spends a lot of time on the bird. Spends a lot of time on them getting in peril up in the mountains.
And the goat.
Yep. Here's a couple things it doesn't spend any time on. Heidi goes to Frankfurt, and she does the thing where she's taking rolls and hoarding them because she wants to give them to the grandmother. And until she started doing this, we looked at each other and we're like, has she even met the grandmother?
Never met.
Not in this version.
Not even once.
Never met her even once. And she says, but I need these for the grandmother.
There's no grandmother.
Who no one's ever met before.
Because we went back and looked in the TV show, and there's a grandmother.
She's there.
She just got cut from the movie version.
And then the grandmama, Clara's grandma, she shows up at the very end of the movie coming to visit her in Dorfley.
But we had never seen her
before.
before.
We'd never seen her before, ever until that moment. These are things the movie decided to cut in lieu of the bird and the dog and peril in the mountains. It is a terrible, terrible dub. There's a whole thing in the book of Heidi going up to the top of the church tower in Frankfurt to get a view of the mountains.
Yeah.
And that's a pivotal scene in almost every version that we saw. In the dub, it's mentioned that she did it, but we never actually see her do it because they didn't want to spend any time on that. The only other thing I have to say about the dub is that the voice of Sebastian was also the voice of Fred Flintstone. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I think we can move on.
No, we can't move on yet because there are two things that I want to say really quickly about the show that are really good, and I don't want to end this just talking about the movie.
Okay.
In the show, one of the things that I really responded to in the book were the fir trees. Because outside the grandfather's house, there are these fir trees that are gigantic.
She likes to stand under them.
Heidi loves them so much, and it is just so beautiful. And just kind of abstract and evocative, and I loved it. I loved it. It's one of my favorite parts of the whole book. Was not in the Shirley Temple version, was not in the 1952. It like really doesn't show up in almost any of these. And we're watching this dub, and I'm going like, man, it really sucks that it doesn't show up in any of them. Then we watched the show. The fir trees are front and center. They are a big part of the show, and it's beautiful and perfect. And I think it's worth mentioning. The last thing about this, the whole idea of her sleepwalking and doing the ghost subplot is because she has this really active dream about going up to the mountains. And the thing the show decided to do with all this extra time that it had was establish the fact that Heidi has a really, really overactive imagination.
Well, she has an active dream life.
Yes.
Yes.
And so she's constantly getting in situations before that happens where she's imagining something or dreaming something and then finds herself having sleepwalked? Sleepwalked.
Sleepwalked.
Sleeping have walked.
Yes. Good.
I really appreciated that because it made the ghost thing work even better.
Yeah.
I'm always glad that we watch these anime versions. Always.
Well, it's interesting because we have two more versions to talk about, both from the 70s. Truly could not have been like night and day. Could not have been more different.
Just like you have one Rottenmeier who wants to sell Heidi to the gypsies and another one who is absolutely gorgeous and in love with Herr Sesemann, and we couldn't be more for it. We also have 1974's BBC miniseries of Heidi and 1978's The New Adventures of Heidi.
The New Adventures of Old Heidi.
Let's talk about BBC first. Thank God for YouTube. This does not exist anywhere. You cannot rent it. You cannot buy it. It is not on any streaming service. It doesn't even have a Wikipedia entry. If you go to IMDb, it doesn't have a cover. The image is just a cast photo. And if you go on YouTube, I'm going to link to it. Someone was like, I grew up watching this on VHS at my grandmother's house. We found the VHS in her attic, and she had it converted to DVD, and I decided to put it up here on YouTube. I do not own this.
The only existing copy in this woman's attic, apparently.
I am so happy that this person did this because we watched 1974's BBC miniseries of Heidi. It was like 2 hours long. It was like 6 half-hour episodes.
Yeah.
So they definitely had to cut stuff to make it 2 hours, and it feels like they cut stuff.
But
it's
so good.
So good.
It's so good. Like, I don't even have that many notes because I was just transfixed and enraptured.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we talk about this a lot. Something doesn't have to be book accurate to be good. If you have a point of view and need to skew from the original version and there's something you really want to talk about, but you're doing a good job with it, like, we love that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But we also love a really good book accurate, jumps off the page version. And that's what I would say that this is. But it also means that I tend to not have as many notes and as many things to say because A, I enjoyed watching it, so I was just watching it, and B, like, yep, there's the book. We already talked about the book. This is it. It's just very British. Everyone's kind of cool. No one's super mean. The grandfather's not that mean. Like, everybody,
he's real crusty.
He's crusty.
He's real crusty.
But even when he went to go
visit,
like
though.
The clip that we were watching right before to kind of refresh our memories, he like went to visit the blind grandmother who was in a Wuthering Heights, I think, that we saw. She was now 18.
Flora Robeson.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Because she's blind, of course, she says to him, you know, who does she favor? Like, who does she look like? Her mother, her father? And he just gives her the, well, a bit like her father. Like a very, like...
He says very specifically, he says, well, she favors her mother. I don't see any of her father in her.
But he doesn't say that in the tone that you just said it. He says it in a very kind, thoughtful tone.
He's not being mean to this lady.
He's not being mean to this lady. It's very sweet.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm sure you have specific things you wanted to talk about.
It was directed by June Wyndham Davies. I mean, I think it's worth mentioning that it was directed by a woman, written by Martin Worth. Emma Blake plays Heidi. Again, one of these kid actors who never really went on to do anything else. Like, this is her biggest credit, and no one talks about this anywhere ever.
And it doesn't exist.
Yeah, basically doesn't exist. Hans Meyer plays the grandfather. Flora Robson is the grandmother. It's full of great people. Let me talk about what you did, but from a slightly different perspective.
Okay.
Someone could look at the book and say, not enough stuff happens. I need to invent drama.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do is look at it and say, I need to make sure that all the moments that happen in the book are actually portrayed with the drama that they deserve.
Yeah.
But it's only showing the things that happen in the book.
Yeah.
But it's actually making the decision throughout the writing, throughout the directing, throughout the editing. how can we actually make these compelling,
Yeah.
but still show them the way they're presented in the book.
Yeah.
So it's full of amazing moments, and you actually feel like all the characters have real relationships with each other, and you actually feel like all the characters are fully fledged characters with an inner life and opinions. No one feels half-baked.
Yeah.
Like, no one at all feels half-baked. It's just a very, very lovingly crafted show.
Yeah.
Everything with the grandfather and the grandmother, they're constantly like all at the house together.
Yeah.
And just talking
They're
and
just
existing
having
together.
conversations. Ms. Rottenmeier has the most amazing headgear I've ever seen.
Yeah.
They clearly, some costume designer saw some contemporary image of something that was at that time, and they were like, yeah, no, we're going to do these bonnets. They're weird. Let's do it. You know, like
Mhm.
it's just someone cared really deeply about a lot of different things. Like someone cared about the script. Someone cared about the costumes. Someone cared about the casting.
Mhm.
Like it's too bad that this is basically lost, except for,
on the biggest video website in the world.
but you know what I mean?
Yes,
Like if
yeah,
not
yeah,
for
yeah,
being
yeah,
in
yeah.
someone's attic, like, you know, it's kind of amazing.
It's a huge bummer. Emma Blake's so good in
She's
this.
really good.
Have you ever seen a child actor with a better curly head of hair than Emma Blake?
Beautiful curly head of hair.
None whatsoever. And she has so much personality right at the beginning when Dita drops her off at the front door and she storms off and the grandfather opens the door and there's Heidi standing there. And he says, "No, you've got to get out of here. You're going to start crying as soon as your aunt gets down the hill." And she just looks up right at him and just goes, "No, actually, I'm fine. I don't really like her very much." Like, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It is really beautiful. And she's not, it was nice. It was nice having a Heidi who wasn't nothing.
Yeah.
Because we had seen a version where Heidi was nothing. It's really good. And also, I think it's important to mention that the grandmama, Claire's grandma, really wants the grandfather.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's clear.
Yeah,
It is
yeah.
very clear that she wants
It
him.
doesn't go anywhere. Unlike 1968, Rottenmeier and Harry Sessamon, where they actually do
Yeah, it's textual, not subtextual.
lock
Yeah.
lips. This is more subtext, but yes, correct.
Yeah. I don't want to speak for you. Tell me if you agree with this. If you are a person who enjoys Heidi or any version of Heidi, and you've never seen this one, which I'm assuming is a lot of people, see this one.
Yeah, yeah. Of
It-
all the ones we talked about.
So worth watching.
Yeah. Moving on though, polar opposite.
Like-
I don't like ending with something that we just hated and was a bummer, but I do like ending with something that we have a lot to say.
Well, just remember, this is Adapt or Perish, their years of wandering and learning. We still have Adapt or Perish, how they used what they learned.
That's
This is
fair.
not the end.
That's
this is only
fair.
the end of part one.
This was one of the weirder things we've watched for the show.
Like, can I just, for context, remind everyone, we talked about the 1968 one, Pizza versus Lasagna.
yeah,
We literally thought it
can't get weirder.
can't get weirder than this.
Oh, how wrong we were. That looks like
Let's
a
see-
that
let's
looks like
see
a
summer children we
textual.
were.
That like next to this, the 1968 one looks like a textual, like beat for beat, like night. That is 1995's Pride and Prejudice compared. My God, where are we?
The
What
new
is
ad-
what is
The
this?
New Adventures of Heidi, 1978. It was a TV movie. Hang on. TV movie musical. Directed by Ralph Sinensky. Written by John McGreevy. Music by Buzz Cohen. Katie Kurtzman as Heidi. Burl Ives as the grandfather. Burl Ives himself.
Looking like he has risen from the grave. Like I don't know how close he was to the end of his life.
I don't know. I mean, he
But-
didn't look as rough at the beginning as
He
he did
didn't
when he
look-
was
he
trapped in
did
the
not look
wild
good.
man's cave.
Oh my gosh. Okay, continue.
Just to be clear, if anyone thought, did he just say trapped in the wild man's cave?
We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
Yes, I said trapped in the wild man's cave. It is real low rent. They shot it on location in Colorado. And New York, of course, they couldn't really shoot in New York City. Instead, they shot in Los Angeles.
Why is it New York City, you ask? We'll get to it.
We'll get to that, too. It just blew my mind what American and British TV were doing to Heidi only 4 years apart.
Yeah.
Like 4 years. And the Brits were saying, we are going to do this very lovingly and very accurately. And Americans were just going, hold my beer. Okay.
Hold
where,
my schlitz.
where do you want to start with this?
Okay. I just like to start with the experience of watching the first 5 minutes of this movie.
Yes.
Heidi and her grandfather are up on the mountain. We've seen 47 versions of this at this point and read the book. So we are primed for a movie that takes place in 1881.
Yeah.
Heidi's got her braids on and she's got her little dress and her little apron. She's singing a song about how much she likes the mountain. and her grandfather's chiming in because he's Burl Ives.
Mhm.
He's singing a song about how much he likes the mountain. Then they go down the mountain into the town to do a thing, and he picks up the telephone and makes a telephone call.
Mhm.
And I go, huh, that's weird. Are we in like 1910? Because he's got one of those phones, like in Mary Poppins where you pick up the little earpiece and put it to your ear.
Mhm.
A real oldie-timey phone. And
Yeah.
you like speak into like this sort of tube thing. And I went, they've moved this forward a few years in time. I'm a little confused about why they would do that, but okay. Then they go outside, and there's cars and buses, telephone lines.
So I'll say this. It was released in 1978. What year do you think this took place?
Well, at first, I thought it took place in 1881. But in fact, it takes place in 1978. It's modern.
Yeah.
But I think they did it on purpose to confuse you. Because when they start up on the mountain and they're singing about their simple life on the mountain, like they're definitely dressed in old-timey clothes.
Mhm.
And then they go down into the modern town, which is called Deerfleet for some reason.
Yeah.
And I just wrote ... What?
I have a lot. My notes from this one are definitely the most they have the most personality
Yeah.
of any of them.
Can I say something about the way that the songs work?
How about you talk about the songs and then I'll talk about Wild Man?
Okay. We were watching the singing, and I said to you, I think they're singing live
Mhm.
because their mouth was matching the words so well that for something of this quality, it couldn't possibly be ADR because it would be too good.
Yeah.
And we're watching and watching, and I was like, not only are they singing live, there were one or two numbers that they definitely weren't singing live,
Mhm.
but the numbers that they're like just Heidi and the grandfather kind of singing up on the mountain, A, they're singing live. B, they don't sound good.
There is
so
that.
I think they might be singing like to a click track, but not to music. I think they might be singing a cappella and they're putting the music in later. I don't think they can hear what they're supposed to be singing to
Mhm.
because it doesn't sound good. And then C, I think they might be making up the words as they go along because the grandfather has all of these songs that he's just like, I'm old and live on the mountain. I hope I die on the mountain when my life is over. That's where I wanna be, on the mountain with me. Like,
And I sing about Heidi.
see,
I
love the mountain and Heidi.
She's my granddaughter, and I
I'm
never want her
old.
to leave.
I hope I can stay on the mountain. That's what it sounded like.
So if what you're thinking is,
That was
wow,
bad.
they loved it, I will tell you, yes, it was amazing.
It's just the plot is
You talked about the music. I want to talk about Wild Man.
okay.
Heidi and Peter are herding the goats, and suddenly there's a crazy guy who comes out of the woods,
And he goes,
and they go, Wild Man. And they go to talk to grandfather about it. He says, you stay away from that Wild Man. And I don't want to get too into Wild Man.
You thought he might have been Heidi's father for a minute.
I was really sure he was going to be somebody. Turns out, nope, just
Nope.
a crazy guy who lives in the woods, lost his family and went crazy. And then, so there is a whole thing in it where we think the grandfather has died. We think he has fallen. All the characters think he has fallen into a river
and Heidi's
drowned.
super sad 'cause
swept
she's going to have
away.
to go live with someone else.
And that's why she goes to leave.
Right.
Because he's dead.
Right.
As we all know from every other version and the book, the grandfather dies 20 minutes into it because he falls into a river. Turns out he was saved by the Wild Man, and while Heidi is off in New York City with her new friend Elizabeth.
New York City, 1978.
He's trapped in the Wild Man's cave. Oh, he's also gone blind. So he is blind in the Wild Man's cave
Right.
for months and months and months. And then finally, the day that Heidi and all of her friends return up to the top of the mountain just to visit it, because she knows the grandfather is dead. They're just visiting the cabin. Wild Man brings the grandfather back. And then, no, hang on, I'll save this.
You're skipping stuff
I
that
know.
I want to talk about.
I said I only wanted to talk about the Wild Man. Sorry, there's the Wild Man. Turns out he's nobody. He's just there.
There's a plot. The grandfather knows that Heidi can't stay with him, and so he calls these snobby cousins that she has down in Lucerne or in Switzerland. They're in Switzerland
Mhm.
because he keeps having these attacks of blindness that make him fall down.
Because that's how going blind works.
I don't.
Everything's fine, and then it's not.
You get an attack,
Yeah.
and then you're better. Which may be how it works for some conditions, but I guarantee it's not this. I guarantee this is not a real thing. He's like, I know that my eyesight is failing me. I'm not going to see a doctor or anything, but I do need you to take Heidi because I'm not going to be able to take care of her. And then they have a whole song about how he tells her like, well, I'm going to go for this job. So I'm not going to be able to live here anymore. So you're going to have to go live with your cousins. And she's like, oh, yeah, it's a really good job. He's $1 million, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna go for this job.
And he lives up on the top of the mountain just fine.
Yeah. So then they have to have a song about how she hopes that she can stay and all this stuff. And then she meets this rich young lady that wanders off from a field trip from her rich young lady's school, stays overnight, and instead of being frantic, like the nun and her dad's secretary are all like, oh, Elizabeth, you and your funny hijinks, staying up all night with these people up on the mountain. Well, anything we can do for you. And the grandfather's like, yeah, actually, could you take this girl? Like,
yeah.
Take her to New York? Oh, sure.
Well, no, they take her to Lucerne, right?
Right.
And then while she's living with Elizabeth, and her dad is a very big, important businessman, he takes them to New York City.
Because they're living in that like big, like beautiful sort of cabin. Right. Because they walk into her and she's like, this is my room. And it's definitely supposed to be like very grand. And I was like, is that a child's room? It looks like someone's like wood paneled camp.
It looks like a hotel room.
It's very bad.
Yeah.
I wrote, this is just a Rex Harrison knockoff. Does the dad have a song at some point that he kind of sings?
Yeah. So there's lots of different songs, and one of the things that ends up happening is there's the dad and there's his assistant.
Yeah.
Who's kind of Rottenmeier, except not really. She's not Rottenmeier.
She's very nice.
There is no Rottenmeier, and she's really nice. And she has a song that is incredible, and it's all about how it like could be in anything. It has nothing to do with Heidi. It's just she's singing a song about how, oh, that man's terrible. No one could love that man.
Something water.
Yeah.
Something daughter.
And there's a bit of business where she's trying to put a coat on while she's singing, and it takes her like a minute to get her arm through the other hole of the coat. It's incredible and worth watching. I'll link to it, but I'll also link to that moment.
Yeah.
Then he has a song about her, and that's, I think, the Rex Harrison bit.
Yeah, it's the second half of the song. It's like paired because it's like that woman or something.
And of course they end up together.
And it turns out the grandfather like just had cataracts or something that was something very easily cured because he gets an operation at the end.
Yeah. At the end, he's cured.
He's cured. It fixes his eyes,
as we all remember from the book.
And then they can just all live up there forever.
Yep.
It's really weird.
A couple little quick things. Peter in this one. He's Pete from Pete's Dragon.
Yeah, he is.
It's the only other thing I've ever seen him in. I'm so happy about it. And he's playing another character named Pete. Delights me to no end. There is an entire subplot when they go to New York because they're visiting the dad's hotel that he owns. And there's a whole subplot with Chef Andre down in the kitchen, who is this French chef who's played by the guy who Scotty and Bones visited in Star Trek 4, the one with the whales, and invented transparent aluminum. It's that guy.
Yeah.
He's in it playing this French chef Andre, and we spend a lot of time with Andre, a lot of time on his love life, a lot of time down in the kitchen. Heidi has nothing to do with it at all, and then finally they go back and everyone's reunited, and it's
one of the weirdest things we've watched for the show.
It blows my mind. It blows my mind that this existed. It blows my mind that people made these choices. It is insane, and I want to apologize for everything that I said at the time and in this episode about the 1968 version. It was not that bad, and they were just doing their best, and they actually did a pretty nice, loving adaptation of Heidi, and this is bad shit.
All right. Well, so stay tuned, folks. We're through 1978, but we got more to go.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a part 2.
And if you're one of the people that really loves that Disney version and you're a little worried about what we said,
we're going to try to be nice.
Let us know, but we're sorry.
We're going to do our best.
Well, this has been Adapter Parish. If you'd like to find us online, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AdaptCast. You can join our groups on Facebook and Goodreads. You can also find and follow me on Letterboxd, and you can listen to my other show, Multiplex Time Machine, all about the movies of 2007. If you have anything to say that's longer than a tweet, you can always send an email to adapterparishcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, there are 3 great ways you can do it. First, tell a friend. Second, a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice would be greatly appreciated. Third, we are on Patreon. This show will always be free, but if you become a patron, you can get access to Adapter Parish Plus, our bonus show that releases every other week between episodes of this show, and our patron-only Slack community. It's been a lot of fun, and all the details are at patreon.com/adaptcast.
Let me tell you another thing I've learned from the eagle.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.